Well, I guess to start things off, Jeff, how do you cast these amazing kids? You keep finding these gems of young talent. Like, what are you doing in your casting?
I just think it's really important to understand the character you're looking for. I think each of these characters has a personality unto themselves. If I've written them correctly, then I've written them, fully intact as people. And when you're casting kids, it's very similar to the way you cast adults. You're looking for somebody that has part of that in their personality already. Certainly with kids, you just need to be very clear with yourself about what you're looking for, and then it's surprisingly easy to find. It's not an easy search. I mean, we searched through thousands of kids to find Jaden, but I mean, it's easy to spot when you see it, I guess is what I mean. And with Jaden, I was looking for someone who had an awareness, somebody that when in the film he becomes aware kind of his place in the universe. That's not something you can act. That's not something, this kind of knowing look behind his eyes. That's not something that a kid can just kind of put on. And when you meet Jaden, you see very quickly that he has that kind of built in.
I'm kind of curious, when you're working with your team, because your team, like Adam, your DP, you've worked with them for all your movies. When you went to this level, when you kind of took a step up with the production value and everything, how did you approach it with those guys that you've been with through the trenches? And was it different? Was it the same for this production?
It was identical, to be honest. And I have to credit Warner Brothers for letting me, use the people that I use to make these movies, because it's very flattering to hear the term auteur and applied to your name, but anybody that's ever made a film knows that's a false word. What makes a Jeff Nichols film is this group of people, and I have a lot of respect for Warner Brothers in that they weren't just hiring me and hiring my name. They wanted, they knew that I needed those people in order to make the film. Adam Stone, my cinematographer, Chad Keith, my production designer, Aaron Bennett, my costume designer, my producers, Brian Cavanaugh Jones and Sarah Green. These people, and I can go way deeper than that, because I've been working with the same people for a long time, my entire camera department. But it's, these people, it's hard to express the amount of influence they have on how these films turn out.
Wow. I was really blown away by David Wingo's work, the music, and I love his work with David Gordon Green, but this one was really poignant, and it didn't seem necessarily as kind of dark as we've seen him go. What was it like capturing the quality of sound for the film?
I think that's mainly in that final piece of music, which during kind of the climax of the film, I have to actually bring up. There's a composer named Ola Giejo, and oddly enough, the choir director at my mom's church emailed me this guy's name. And I get emails kind of like that a lot, of like, hey, you should look at this, you should look at that. I try and pay attention to them, though, because you never know when you're going to find a diamond in the rough. And in this particular instance, Ola was incredible. Now, he was doing strictly kind of religious music, but he was doing choral stuff, and he was doing choral stuff that didn't sound as traditional as most choral stuff. It kind of sounded like Arvo Pärt or some other stuff like that, and I think that had a tremendous influence on my writing, and I played a lot of that stuff for David. In fact, we use pieces of one of Ola's songs in the final moments of the film, and I think that probably that helped start kind of a baseline for David to work from in those final moments. It kind of helped establish a tone that we were going for, because it's not like and some people I think this is a shortcoming in the film, but it's not a Spielberg film. It's not John Williams. John Williams, who I love John Williams scores, but there is a lightness to them. There is an airiness to them that we don't have, and some people would consider that a limitation. I just consider it it's an aesthetic choice. It's a tonal choice for me as a director, and David and I think we sync up very much on that. It would be impossible to micromanage the tone of a song, or the tone of a piece of score. So you have to kind of be tonally, aesthetically on the same page. And David Winkle and I are very much fit into that.
Wow, very cool. I'm kind of curious. I was a little scared with the reading about the movie. It's a bigger production. Is it going to keep that southern kind of touch that you seem to have in all your films? And yet the first moments you hear are Fort Worth, Texas, and I felt immediately like right there in this little small setting in San Angelo and all that. I know you didn't necessarily film all around there, but you got to film everywhere.
Yeah, they wouldn't let us.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious, what's it like making a big movie but still keeping it honed into this little southern gem that you seem to touch upon so well?
Thank you. I think it's about the writing. I think I think universality is gained through specificity. So I think instead of sitting down as a writer and saying, man, I wonder what people want to watch, I wonder what will really connect out there in the world, which is what a lot of like 4-quadrant big studio films need to do, because they need to make $1 billion and they need everybody to like them. I don't make movies that cost that much money, so I am not burdened by that same result. And the way that I try and make my films universal is I'm very specific about all of these inspirations, the places I grew up, the people I knew growing up, the things around me today as I'm living my life. Like, what do those look like? What do those sound like? The more specific you can be about those things, and the more you can get those into the wardrobe, the set decoration, the locations, everything. I think that protects the honesty of the thing.
I don't want to spoil anything, but on the flip side of that, dealing with the other side, the other world, let's say, of the architecture, let's say, how did you come up with that? Where did that diamond in the rough, because it looks amazing on screen. I don't want you to reveal too much, but where did those inspirations come from?
Well, yeah. I mean, because this is all spoiler stuff, so anybody that's watching it should stop watching right now. It would be better. But there's a great short film called The Third and the Seventh, and it was made by this guy in Spain. He was working with in the advertising world in Europe, and I think he got kind of burned out, so he just kind of locked himself in his apartment for a year and made this short film that is 100% CG. There's 7 art forms, the third being architecture, the 7th being film, so we made a short film dedicated to those, and he would take real buildings, like a Calatrava building that I think is in Milwaukee, and put it like in the middle of the ocean, and a beautiful sculpture, and put it in the middle of a wheat field. That short film was a big inspiration, so I'll probably leave it at that.
Oh, that's very cool. Thank you. This is going to be a big year for you, obviously, with this, and then what's coming in November, hopefully, with Loving and how that expands. Like, this must be kind of interesting. Like, where do you start looking for projects? I mean, Loving is I think it'll be the first time that you've taken real life characters and put them into your story. What was that process like?
Well, Loving specifically, it was tricky. I remember sitting down to write that script and being kind of creatively paralyzed for a couple months, just because I felt like a fraud. Every film I've written has been cut from whole creative cloth, so these characters are all mine. I own them. And here I am, this middle-class white kid born in 1978, writing about an interracial couple that's living through the 60s. It took a lot of gumption to sit down and take ownership of those characters, and I just had to do as much research as possible. I just tried to understand as best I could, and there's not a lot of information about the Lovings themselves. I tried to, through the documentary footage I had and through the research materials I had, I just tried to understand the essence of who they were. I'm not going to get it 100% right, but I'm going to try and get the essence of who they are right. And once I had that realization, excuse me, it was kind of liberating. I was able to, like I say, kind of take ownership of them and do what I needed to in order to get the story told. But as far as the year that's coming, it looks really good on paper. Hopefully, Midnight Special originally was supposed to come out last year. It was done last June. So that one's been just sitting there waiting. And it's just kind of, it's the way it worked out. It probably will never happen this way again for the rest of my life. Kind of hope it doesn't, to be honest. I'm going to need a break here pretty soon.
Since we're at a theater, I'm curious, what's your fondest moment in the theater seeing a film? Like, what stands out when you were in a theater?
I have so many. My dad and I, we didn't really go fishing. We didn't go hunting. Growing up in the South, we just went to go see movies. That was our thing. And so, going to the local theater, I can remember weeks where I would open up the paper to look at movie show times, and I would have seen everything probably twice. It's just what we did. There was a theater in Little Rock called the Cinema 150. That was a dome theater, single screen. It was probably the most beautiful theater I've ever been in my life. And I know for a fact the experiences I had in that theater shaped who I am, probably as an adult, as also certainly as a filmmaker. I was in 5th or 6th grade, and they had a reissue of Lawrence of Arabia. And they showed it in scope. And it was probably one of the most significant film viewing experiences of my life. And, I was a kid, so there were definitely some details of Lawrence of Arabia that went over my head. But I was certainly struck by that landscape, and I was certainly struck by that frame. I mean, it's also the same place I saw the Indiana Jones films and E.T. and everything else. But, yeah, Cinema 150. I think it's a parking lot now.
Wow, that's crazy. Kind of last question about landscapes. You are helping paint a landscape of the southern world. What are you finding in the southern world you love so much? Because you're finding little gems with what you show us. Like, what are you looking for out there, I guess?
It's not what I'm looking for. It's what I'm looking at. I think it's my job to try and make a narrative film that's as close to a documentary as possible. I want these things to represent real behaviors, real emotions, real feelings, real places. I just try to observe what's around me, and I try and be a good student of life around me, because it's not necessarily my job to wholly invent this stuff. It's my job to interpret things, and my movies, hopefully to some degree, are a bit of a mirror that we look at ourselves with.
Wow, I think that's a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much, Jeff, and I love this.